Okay, welcome back. This will be Angular Tour of Heroes Part 2. When I left off, we were on observables. Since I last recorded, I finished the whole tutorial. So what I'm going to do here is go through the rest of the tutorial and figure out what I can explain and what I've learned from this tutorial. So we're just going to stick around. We're just going to stay in the browser here and figure things out. I remember when I left off, I was not sure what observables are, so I Googled it and came up with that from my history. Observables, observables seem like an interesting concept. I still don't quite understand why they're useful over promise, because at least in the context that Angular uses them for getting data from a server, you actually don't really need them. You can do get heroes this.http.get of a URL with just a fetch call. So the one nice thing about observables here is that they get you out of async problems where you would have to do async thing equals some function, and then in order to get the result of that, actually hold on. In order to get the result of that, I would have to do, oopsie, I cannot type this morning. I'd have to do const hello equals await thing, and then you're just always waiting on something. What observables, the ergonomic benefit of observables is that you can just subscribe to them and they give you the data. And then the other problem is, in order to actually get hello out, I have to do hello.resolve, or in the case of an HTTP request, it's hello.text or hello.json, and that having calls everywhere like that gets a little bit problematic. With observables, I can just get the response data, and then they have other niceties. This pipe thing is useful, but again, I can just use a promise here. Yes, I can. Observables take a multiple call thing. So, there's the actual class. Okay. So subscribe optional, default is undefined. Okay, yes. A lot of strikeout here. So again, with observables, I have I still don't really I still don't really see why I shouldn't just use promise dot all to resolve multiple promises, unless it's like a sequential thing. I'll have to play around with that some more. So that makes sense. I mean, I say it makes sense. I understand the application of observables. I just don't understand the why behind said observables. So that's that. Messages, it's just another component. It ends up being, actually I lied, we're gonna jump to the into the application here. This will be the completed application because I don't feel like trying to sort through all of the stuff that I was working on. Tea is delightful. I have a nice oolong. So the completed application ends up looking like this. What we're building here is this message service here. So all that does is take a string and display it on the page. So I can select a hero and it will tell me that I've grabbed that hero, or I can go back to the dashboard and clear messages. It's just string handling, and it shows it. The one thing this does introduce is ngIf, and that only displays the messages if there are messages. So again, to draw a comparison to Vue.js, like I have been previously, we have vif syntax in Vue.js, which does this. It's exactly the same thing. So the live demo shows exactly what this does. Here is adding the message service to the hero component, or to the plural hero component, heroes. It just calls the observable, and the heroes service has the call to the message service. So right there, like that. The next step was adding navigation. I don't know what is going on. Well, I do know what is going on here. My navigation is messed up because I didn't start with the live example application. So, and the other thing is I got to skip this step because I started with ng-new instead of downloading their provided example code. ng-new, if you provide it the routing option, will generate this for you automatically. And then routes are not terribly difficult to understand. You just tell it what path and what component to render at that path, and it does what it's supposed to do. I'm not quite sure what functionality, because there was no coverage of possible functionality that you could add into the app routing module class, but I'm sure if I needed to do some processing on a URL resolution, I could do it in that class. So that's that. And then the rest of this page just describes all of the calls here. So I don't see why you would not want this for root routes in here. I guess if you had, okay. No. I guess if you had multiple layers of Angular applications, you would tell it a different route for its routes. And then again, this has a comparison in Vue.js with router, I think it's router Vue. Yeah, in Vue.js, instead of router outlet, it's router Vue. So, same thing. The syntax is a little bit different, but it's not terribly challenging to understand. If you know one, you kind of know both. In the case of Angular and Vue, I can't speak to React. And the other difference between Vue and Angular is Vue just straight up replaces the Ahref with router link 2 here, whereas Angular extends the anchor tag. They end up at the same place. You end up with a link to the desired route. Here we're building this dashboard, which initially doesn't have this hero search that was added later. And my phone's going off. Don't really care. So we're building the dashboard component, which just renders this list. So it takes in a list of heroes from the hero service, and then gets the first 5 of them. And then there's the CSS. Because I've been doing web dev for several years now, understanding all of this is fairly straightforward for me. So none of this is new. Again, here's a redirect. In Vue Router, redirects are a little different, but I won't bother looking that up at the moment. And then here's another addition to the application. So when I left off, all we had was just a list of these heroes. Again, I've got a bunch of stuff done that wasn't here before, like removing a hero is something that we'll implement later. And then if we go back to the dashboard and then jump back here, you can see that those heroes are gone. Now, because of how the later section of the tutorial mocks out actual HTTP calls and provides a fake database, when I actually do reload this page, we get everything back. So it's not like I'm actually committing to any of this. So yeah, this section adds the details component. So when I just click on one of these, it pulls. Oh, that's another thing that was different. Here, when you click on a hero, the information would show up at the bottom of the screen. In this part of the tutorial, we pull that out into its own page. So, like this, and then that gets updated. So here's the link. And then here's the actual hero detail component being built out. This grabs the activated route, as it obviously states, location is the URL, I believe, and then the hero service. So ng on init is the mounted hook from Vue.js, basically. I think I covered that last time. And then here we're using the hero service to get a single hero. Again, here's the message service using string interpolation, like that JavaScript has that now. Really nice. And then where did the actual use of location come into play? This .location. Yeah. Let's see what the location class does. Okay, has a path, state, check whether or not the path is equal to something. Okay, normalize, that's probably fine. Jump to a URL. Jump back in history. Some observable. Oh, back just clicks the back button. Okay. Is there a, I think there's a just native web API to do that. Okay. Window.history.back. Okay. Yeah. So the location class just wraps, apparently just kind of wraps the native browser API and then extends it slightly. Having all of this stuff in one place is nice, but we already have all of this stuff in one place in the DOM APIs. So, like my question with observables, why does this exist? What, aside from these extensions, I mean, again, window.location is current path equal to, I'm sure there's something with Angular's routing that would make this easier. However, I can always do window.location.path double equals, or if I could type, let's do triple equals. Window.location.path is not equal to things. We knew that already. What is window.location.path? Oh, window.location.path name. So again, I can just do window.location.path name triple equals thing, and I don't have to use this call. It might be useful if I had a query string location dot, what's the window.location.search will get a query string. So if I add a query string to this, we have window.location.search equals A equals B. So there's some possible benefit here, but when you already know the DOM APIs, this feels redundant. Again, I'm new with Angular, so I can understand having a consistent API, and that's the best reason that I can think of to have this location class at my current level of experience. So here's the full final routing and other components. So we added the dashboard, the messages, and then the details, and we extracted out the details. Here's the final routes, and here's the hero service, which returns an observable of heroes, or yes, an observable of multiple heroes. The app component has a router outlet now and does not much else. And then CSS is not hard to understand. That's probably why my navigation doesn't work. Oh well. Or doesn't look good. Oh well. Dashboard components. Again, we'll kind of just breeze through the CSS. It's honestly not the interesting part of this application. So again, here's that ng4. This has a analog in Vue.js with v4. So the syntax is a little bit different. I think ng4 is closer to native JavaScript, but click the wrong tab. But I don't think this is terribly far off of native JavaScript either. So yeah, I think this implements object destructuring, whereas this syntax implements object destructuring, whereas this for-let hero of heroes doesn't do object destructuring in the same transparent way, based on my current understanding. I may be missing some understanding here, but that's my feeling about the matter. So this is the hero detail component. This is basically the same. Two-way data binding, wonderful stuff. So if I come back here and click here, I can just do, actually let's do Dr. Nice Guy, and the HTML updates along with the input field. That's what this ng model thing does. So it is what it is. And then we've already figured out what go back does. That's set up here, this.location.back. And I've already explained why I'm questioning why I need that. Now the next step is to actually do HTTP. Angular's HTTP client wraps AJAX calls in an observable. So if you wanted to, you could drop all of this and just use the fetch API. So instead of running everything through Angular's observables and having to call subscribe everywhere, you can just use fetch. Like this. So yeah, then chances are that's what I'm going to end up doing, unless I end up in some employment situation where I actually do need to follow convention and use the HTTP module. So here's what I was saying earlier, where if I save this, Dr. Nice Guy saves apparently, and then I can come over here again, back where we were, and then I can like delete stuff, and if I refresh, it all goes back to what it was, because we're using this in-memory DB that is kind of nice. There was a note in here that the in-memory data service is in-memory web API module has nothing to do with HTTP and Angular. So I guess it's based on the NPM name, it's related to Angular. But if I already had the API to call, I could just skip this part. Okay, that makes sense. So here's where we get into actually calling stuff. This all ends up in the hero service. So we define our API, URL. We inject the HTTP client. The message service was already there, so we don't need to do anything with that. And then we dry up the code because there was some repeated calls to the message service in the hero service at that time. This refactors to this HTTP GET of the hero URL. So this makes a note that returns an observable of hero, which is an observable of hero arrays. However, I'm guessing because of the data structure we defined here, it's only going to ever return the single array. And then error handling. This is where this pipe starts to come into play. Let's see what the RxJS documentation says about pipe. Oh, okay. So if you remember jQuery, you could do, well, if I could type, if you remember jQuery, you could do $thing dot each dot I think you could just do $thing dot each dot hide. This is essentially the same thing as that chaining. I think it's a little bit more flexible because it would allow you to chain more functions, more like a Unix command line pipe where I can grep for something. So I can do grep I could grep for hello and then pipe that to grep for goodbye, and that would find, if I do this correctly, that will find all instances of hello that are on the same line as goodbye. This won't return anything probably, and it's not worth spending the time because Node Modules is an annoyingly large folder. So we're just not going to run this. But I'm guessing observable.pipe does the same thing as this. Again, my understanding is fresh and somewhat untested, so I could be wrong, but I think that's what it does. The handle error message sends a log to the console and returns an empty result. Here's us using the pipe functionality where it does this and then that. So it's a way of, okay, I guess it's also kind of a way of passing multiple callbacks to the same function, which again, native.js can do with thing, and then you can do that. Something like that. That's not valid syntax because I haven't surrounded that in curly braces, and arrow functions can only do one line if you don't surround them in curly braces. Obviously, this is less than ideal in implementation, but if I want to pass multiple calls to a thing, I'll just wrap it in a lambda. Not a big deal. So it's great because it gives us a way to do something similar with observables. I don't know if there's an execution order situation here where maybe RxJS can do something semi in parallel. JavaScript is painfully single-threaded, much to its great benefit and also great demise, but it's possible that there's some magic going on behind the scenes with RxJS and observable.pipe, but I don't know. Again, this just gets a single hero. I later on in the tutorial will see that there's another method that doesn't 404, but I honestly can't think of a reason why you would want it to not 404. 404s are useful errors. Again, the Zen of Python is useful here. Errors should never pass silently. So there are some rare occurrences where that's acceptable, but in general, I agree errors should never go silently. This implements the save button. So when I click here, as I demonstrated earlier, I can add Dr. Nice Guy and hit save, and then back on the home page, quote unquote, it shows Guy. And then so in the hero detail component, we add this. If there's a hero, we update it. And this is the HTTP put call. This HTTP client does add some useful wrapper around the fetch API, because using the fetch API, doing a put call, you have to pass headers like this, which is this at least exposes more of how the sausage gets made, for lack of a better metaphor, which in my opinion is never a bad thing. Knowing how the sausage gets made might put you off of the sausage, yes, but when something goes wrong, if you know how the sausage is made, you know where to look to figure out what got stuck in the sausage that shouldn't be there. So forgive the slightly off-putting metaphor, but I went with it. So yeah, this wraps the fetch API in something more palatable, arguably. Then I still have to deal with observables, but they're not awful. And then here's adding a new hero. So this implements this button. One thing Angular has that is really nice is these in HTML variable bindings. There's a name for those that I can't recall, and I don't really want to bore people with searching for it. So these variable bindings are really nice, because that allows me to just do hero name.value, and then we're all good into hood. Tea. I already mentioned it's tasty. So here's the add function. Okay, subscribe takes a callback that allows you to do a thing once you get a result here. So, and then here's the actual add function. Again, this wraps something like the fetch API in something more TypeScripty, which is not a bad thing. It's just different. I can achieve, it's syntactic sugar. I can achieve something similar with the fetch API just by returning, just by typing it with fn by typing it like that instead of typing it as an observable of hero. So that's the native, quote unquote, native way to do it in TypeScript. This is the syntactic sugar Angular way to do it. So it seems like a matter of preference or convention. This implements this little X. So here's the actual X button. And here it is added to the actual application. In my implementation of this button, I made the dumb mistake of putting the button inside the link, so when you clicked the X, it navigated to the page instead of removing the listing. That was a wonderful thing to debug. It's one of those things where you don't realize you screwed up or how you screwed up, and you think you're the one that's crazy, when really you probably are the one that's crazy because you put the button in the wrong place. Again, more support for my argument of always asking the dumb question first when you do tech support. It won't turn on. Is it plugged in? I fried a CPU by not doing that once. Thankfully, it wasn't my computer, and it was an old CPU anyway. So, the person I was building the computer for was willing to go buy new parts and ended up better off for it. Instead of getting a 4th gen Intel, they ended up with a 10th gen or 9th gen Intel. It's what we could afford at the time. Or it's what my friend could afford at the time. So this implements the actual delete call, again, wrapping around fetch. The search is, so if we search for, who can we search for? Dr. Nice Guy, like that. So I would maybe, if I were designing this application, maybe have done the search differently, because I believe in URLs. URLs are great ways of managing small amounts of state, like a search query, and they allow you to send somebody else your same search results. So if I'm in an organization where I have something like Slack and the application that I'm working with does not use URLs correctly, i.e. wrapping the actual search in an AJAX call instead of redirecting to a results page, I can't copy paste the URL and have them end up in the same location that I did. That's annoying. So, yes. Minor design implementation difference. Where did we go? There we were. So, yeah. What is this tap function? It pulls the value out of the pipe and allows you to process the value from the pipe. Excuse me. Pulls the value out of, it looks like it pulls the value out of the pipe and allows you to do processing on said value. Let's check, let's confirm our understanding with the documentation. Tap. Okay. Yeah. I'm basically correct. So here's the actual search box. Again, we're using the variable binding here and then grabbing searchbox.value. So that's really useful. Here's the results display. This async pipe is really nice. It avoids the async problem that I mentioned earlier where you're always just calling await for something. So here's the component. So this defines the hero's dollar property as never null, I think. Wrong window. Wrong search term. Let's try that. Okay, fine. We'll go to Stack Overflow. Yeah, okay. And from there we get the actual documentation. We like documentation. I like documentation. I don't really like Stack Overflow. Yes, it's useful. Yes, I've used it. I always try to follow links to source material. Stack Overflow can be wrong. So yeah, the bang operator tells TypeScript that this will never be null. And it's never null because ng on init grabs a value for it immediately. I would probably, if I were designing this application, I would probably let it be null and then let it handle that null and as a failure. So that's just a design implementation detail that is mostly inconsequential. This debounce is useful. That's also from RxJS. I don't see where we've included debounce. Oh, yeah, that's where we've included debounce. Distinct and child changed is also useful. And then switch map. Okay. I could take 5 minutes and implement this. In fact, let's do that. So let's pull this out of RxJS and out of observables and implement it as a native browser API. So search terms. Okay. Search term is a subject string. Again, that's okay. So native. So let's just call this native. Set set search terms equal to empty string. Search terms equal to empty string, and then because it's already a string, so we'll set search terms equal to empty string. That's TypeScript thing. Okay. We don't need that, really. So, and then heroes dollar equals, we'll do empty array. So, ng on init, this dot heroes dollar equals let's assume this is the input. Let's assume that's the input text. So heroes dollar equals just we'll kill the TypeScript entirely. So now async ng on init equals that. Now we'll do await. Oh, and then let's also pull in. Let's just pull in the here the URL. So nope, I want const. So we're gonna await fetch. We're gonna await fetch hero URL. Oh, because we want to debounce, we need to. Set timeout. That does the debounce. And then oh, we also need to so that does the debounce. Distinct until changed is easy enough because we can do if so I like arrow functions here. Right, that was a syntax error. If this dot search terms equals local search that's effectively distinct until changed. And then let's do that. That way it gets reassigned every 300 milliseconds instead of, yeah. Instead of constantly. And we actually need to do this at the end. Because if we do it here, this if is always true. So if we do it here, this if is not always true. So there's that. Oh. We don't even need the URL here. We can just do this like that. And then assuming this dot, assuming this dot hero service dot search heroes returns returns a promise, we can do that. Then we don't need this, and we don't need that. There. That's effectively the same thing. It doesn't... The other thing we need to do... Okay, we can't do that yet. We have to... Yeah. That's close. It's not... There's probably a bug, and it's probably not perfect, but I've done this debounce situation enough times that this is probably as close as I'm going to get without actually spending the time to test it. So these should be functionally equivalent. If I wasn't using an arrow function, I would have to do and then I'd have to bind this, so it'd be or something similar. But arrow functions eliminate the need for that binding. So those are effectively equivalent. To me, the readability is also effectively equivalent. So this return accomplishes distinct until changed. This whole if accomplishes distinct until changed. The debounce is accomplished by the set timeout, and the switch map, well, this is effectively switch map. That whole block is effectively the switch map and the debounce combined into a single function call. So yeah, that's that. And then the search component, we were just dealing with that. Okay. That's interesting. So one thing I glossed over when I was going through this is that observable is kind of they call it a stream. So it's a live, another way to put it would be like it's a live queue where you're always watching for changes, and then this next grabs the latest change. Let's see if RxJS has time travel. Observable. Let's see if we can rewind. Is there a previous? Nope. Okay, you can convert an observable to promise. I don't... see a previous. Search. Okay. So why... That brings up the question, why do I have this if it's not a persistent data structure a la Clojure? Clojure has persistent vectors. I don't know Clojure very well, but persistent data structures are really useful in that you can, in effect, time travel. So I can say let thing equal 1, 2, 3, and then later in my code I can again say let thing equal 3, 4, 5, and then I still have a way, maybe not with this specific structure in Clojure, because like I said, I'm not quite sure, I don't quite know how this works in Clojure, but I do know that this is in theory possible. You can unwind your assignments such that you can get back to 1, 2, 3. This is not valid JavaScript. So my question is, if I'm going to use the observable here for the next function, why do I use that when it doesn't have a previous function? If I wanted to back up in time, even a limited amount, that would, this stream, it would be useful if the stream could be rewound. That's my thought. It would be nice if there was something like let value this dot value equals v. Let's let value equal array, and then this dot value dot push v. And then next would be actually next could be a generator that would yield v sub 0, and then rewind, and then previous could be a generator actually something like that. So something like that. That would be that's close. It's not perfect, but having a rewind functionality like that would be nice. Heck, you could even implement it as a promise. So again, my tea making me a little bit impolite. I apologize. So here's the actual end of the tutorial. And that's my quick overview of the Tour of Heroes after having completed it. Since I did the actual implementation off screen, this was my best attempt at giving you at doing the part 2. So yeah, I think that's enough for now. So I'll catch you next time. Right. Let's actually stop the recording like this. No, I don't have a key binding for it. And I probably won't set one up, but we'll see.